Hi guys, this is Patricia from the Elizee Law Firm. Today we're going to be speaking about green card holders, everything that you guys need to know before you take a trip abroad. So, as you guys know, green card holders that are traveling abroad need to be very careful and really know their rights, especially now under the current administration. Whether you're going on vacation, a family visit, or a business trip, there are some key things you need to know before you leave the country, and especially before you come back into the United States and go through customs. Okay, so let's break it down. The most important tips and rules so that your travel goes smoothly and you protect your permanent resident status is exactly what we're going to be focused on today. Firstly, let's start with what is a green card holder. A green card holder, as a quick refresher, is a lawful permanent resident, right? Or an LPR. What does that mean? That means someone who has the permission of the government to lawfully permanently reside in the US, right? You have the legal right to live here, to work in the US permanently. But even though you have the right to stay here indefinitely in the US, there are limits, right? There are limits on how long you can stay outside of the United States as a lawful permanent resident. Staying abroad for too long could put your status at risk. Unlike US citizens, green card holders cannot live abroad, cannot spend too much time outside the country. First step is, what's the difference between short trips and long trip? Let's start with short trips. If you're leaving the US for less than 6 months, for the most part, you're not going to have any issues. This is good news. There are usually no major issues with green card holders coming back from a trip of less than 6 months. You should be allowed back in without much hassle. However, keep in mind that immigration has the ability to look at your travel history. And even though your last travel was for less than 6 months, the immigration officer can still look to see historically, right? Have you been physically inside the US more than you've been outside of the US? A trip between 6 to 12 months could raise questions at the border. Officers might ask you if you abandoned your resident status, if you don't have the thought or the aim to actually reside in the US. They can ask you for documentations. For example, where do you work? Where do you have a home? Do you file taxes in the US? Where's your family situated? Now, a trip over 12 months without special permission, this is definitely a red flag. That could actually result in you losing automatically your green card. So you want to be very careful. Let's transition to, what is that special permission, a re-entry permit. If you're planning on being outside the US for a year or more, you must file for a re-entry permit before you leave the United States. This document tells the United States Immigration that you intend to return, and it helps protect your permanent resident status while you're abroad. Now, this special permission is valid for up to 2 years and shows CBP that you didn't mean to abandon your status during your stay abroad. You should start by filing Form I-131, and here's the key. You need to be physically present in the US when you file it, and you also have to do your biometrics, your fingerprint appointments, before you leave the United States. So, what should you know before you travel, right? The first thing you want to do is you need to know to double check the validity of the green card. The last thing you want to do is to be stuck abroad with an expired green card and not sure whether you can come back to the US or not. If it's expiring soon, you want to make sure to renew it as quickly as possible by filing Form I-90, which can be done online, and they can also make the process go a little faster. You also want to look into the visa requirements for the country you're visiting. Being a US resident doesn't mean that you can travel to any country you want without a visa. You want to make sure to double check their requirements, right? So if your trip involves layovers, check the transit visa policies of those countries as well. You want to make sure there's no surprises during your trip. And don't forget travel insurance, especially if you're traveling for an extended period. It's most likely that US health insurance policy will not cover you overseas. Now, what are some important don'ts to consider? Here are some quick tips as to what you should avoid as a green card holder traveling abroad. So firstly, you definitely don't want to stay outside the country for over a year without having an approved re-entry permit, okay? You do not want to ignore your green card renewal dates. You definitely want to file to renew your green card at least 6 months before it expires. Don't assume that you can come and go freely into the US. CBP officers look at patterns. If you're spending more time outside the US than in, this could definitely be a red flag. You have to understand, as a green card holder, you don't have the same legal rights as a US citizen, okay? Remember, having permanent residency is a privilege and not a guarantee. So what's the re-entry process? When you come back to the US, you want to be prepared to answer questions about your trip. Remember, a green card holder that's outside the US coming back is not guaranteed re-entry. Legally, you're actually applying to be let back in. So you want to be ready to answer questions. For example, why did you travel? How long were you gone? What are the different countries you visited? Do you still work in the US? Do you still have a permanent address in the United States, right? If you've been gone for a long time, you want to make sure you have evidence in your hands if they ask you for them. For example, evidence of a lease agreement, utility bills in the US, tax returns that you filed, or even pay stubs that you're receiving for your job that's located in the US. Remember that immigration officers have the authority to deny you entry if they believe that you've abandoned your US residency. So it's all about being able to show and convince the immigration officer that you continue to have ties in the US and the United States is your lawful permanent residence as an LPR, right? So we say all this to say what? First of all, make sure to keep your green card valid. You want to avoid long absences from the United States. You want to make sure to apply for a re-entry permit if needed. You want to maintain strong ties with the US. And you want to make sure to know the visa rules of the countries that you're visiting before you leave for your trip.